Part 10. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 91. The old man looked ugly and sighed helplessly. I didn't expect to lose in the end. Our ancient pavilion is still no match for Suanman. Say it. Dozens of fights followed. Without exception. It was Zhang Xuanyi who won, which made his power increase by 1 point. If I win one more game, I will be the first person to enter Tianqian's secret realm, Zhang Xuanyi said with a smile. But reality is cruel after all, especially when you have one last chance to win. God is going to start playing tricks on you. In the 59th match, Yeqing, an inner disciple of Waxi Sect, challenges Suanman Saint Child Zhang Xuanyi. The words fell. Two figures appeared in the space. Two daoist shadows stand facing each other. Zhang Xuanyi looked at the figure opposite and murmured, Yeqing? Who is this person? Why do I feel a sense of oppression in him? Zhang Xuanyi couldn't help but frown. He had never felt it when fighting other people, and he had never felt it when fighting Guo Zheng. Why did he feel a sense of oppression against this man named Yeqing? Opposite him, Yeqing looked at Zhang Xuanyi with cold eyes, and there was a trace of electric light in his eyes. Then he waved his hand and shouted, Thunder! Boom boom, boom boom. A huge thunder struck Zhang Xuanyi in the space with terrifying momentum. You actually practice thunder-based skills, Zhang Xuanyi frowned. He couldn't help but get more energetic, took out the ancient dragon sword, used Suanman third layer, and directly carried the giant thunder down. Boom! The lightning was instantly shattered. But before it was over, another thunderous sound came. In the sky above the space, dark clouds instantly appeared, with lightning flashes constantly coming out of them, and the harsh thunder kept ringing in Zhang Xuanyi's ears. Then 10 giant thunders turned into flood dragons and rushed straight towards Zhang Xuanyi, as if they wanted to chop him into pieces. Boom! Boom boom boom! Boom! Zhang Xuanyi kept dodging the giant thunder attacks, but he was still planning a route in his mind, looking for an opportunity to get close to Yeqing and give him a fatal blow. But it's a pity that once he gets forward, the number of giant thunders becomes more, giving him no chance to counterattack. Damn it, is this kid's physique a thunder body? Otherwise, how is it possible that you can consume such a large amount of spiritual energy to continuously attack me? Zhang Xuanyi cursed angrily. Everyone outside also saw this scene. There was constant talk. Who is this kid? Zhang Xuanyi was actually suppressed by him. Why did this huge thunder actually make me a little scared? It's unclear, but the only thing that's certain is that this person should have a physique related to thunder. Otherwise, how could he continue to emit thunder and lightning without a physique? Qi Yunzi naturally saw this scene, frowned, and couldn't help but start to panic. Who is this guy? I can't see through his strength. This is completely impossible. The sarcastic old man naturally saw this scene, and he was a little gloating. After all, he didn't want Suanman to enter the Tianqian secret realm, otherwise their ancient pavilion would be really in danger. Other forces like Yundan Tower, Longquan Sect, and other forces slowly watched this scene, their eyes flickering as if they were planning something. In the void, a man wearing white cloud-flying clothes watched the scene with a smile. It was Nan Xiao. There was a charming woman standing next to him. A lock of beautiful black hair spread around her body like a waterfall, curved eyebrows, and a pair of captivating beautiful eyes. It seems that you can be attracted to her just by looking at her. The robe clung to her skin, revealing her proud and seductive figure. Her name is Magnolia. Nan Xiao stood with his hands behind his hands, staring quietly with his deep eyes, and a smile on his lips. He nodded and said, This boy is not bad. After the 5-domain competition is over, the lord of this domain will personally accept him as his disciple. After all, what my heavenly palace lacks now is this kind of genius. Yulan on the side smiled charmingly and agreed, As the master, I believe he will worship you as his teacher. He can control the power of thunder and lightning, which means that he must have a physique with thunder attributes, and he can be introduced to the palace master. Look, I believe the palace master will be interested in this child. Nan Xiao nodded and laughed. He held Yulan in his arms and looked at her affectionately. Yulan, you look so beautiful today. Magnolia's cheeks turned slightly red at the sudden words, but she didn't resist and just leaned on the man's chest. When everyone is talking. Yeqing in the space had already beaten Zhang Xuanyi until he was covered in blood. Thunder is equivalent to thunder tribulation. With the spiritual power of thunder, no one can stop it. Unless you have the physique of fire, it will be difficult to win. Whoosh! Zhang Xuanyi half knelt on the ground, breathing heavily, and his forehead was covered with sweat. I can't get close at all. It seems that I lost this game. I never expected that a sect that I have never heard of could have such a genius. Zhang Xuanyi shook his head helplessly, gritted his teeth and stood up. Yeqing, who was opposite him, saw him stand up and was about to take action again, but what was waiting for him was Zhang Xuanyi's bow and respect. Brother Yeqing, you won this fight. I am no match for you. I give up. Hearing this, Yeqing's expression was slightly shaken, and he put away the thunder and lightning with a wave of his hand. Then he raised his hands and said, well, I have offended you a lot just now. Don't hold grudges against senior brother Xuanyi. Zhang Xuanyi laughed and waved his hand, indicating that it didn't matter. He was not the kind of person with a small belly. The words fell. The space disappeared and two figures appeared on the field. It attracted exclamations from everyone present, but there were also some sneers and dissatisfaction. But without exception, Yeqing didn't hear it. In his opinion, a win is a win, and a loss is a loss, without any argument. Arguing is nothing more than bullying yourself and has no background. Zhang Xuanyi did the same. He glanced at everyone, shook his head, and exited the venue. Returning to where the Suanmen forces were, Qi Yunzi saw him coming back and asked him about it as if he couldn't wait. Do you know his strength? Zhang Xuanyi shook his head, I'm not sure, but in my opinion, the strength is at least not weaker than that of martial sovereign. I have completely tasted that thunder and lightning. Qi Yunzi nodded and did not continue to ask. Losing is a loss in itself, there is no need to dwell on it anymore. After all, Nan Xiao is still watching, and he, Qi Yunzi, does not have the strength to act recklessly. Profound Heaven Sect. Master Xiao, what do you think? Ling Gu pointed at Yeqing on the stage and asked. Xiao Ran shook his head, how else can I see it? It's just the difference in strength. Then do you think this Yeqing has some mysterious physique? Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 92. Xiao Ran looked at Yeqing who was standing in the field, thought for a moment and said, the physique must be there, otherwise even if he is practicing thunder attribute skills, he would not be able to release the spiritual power of lightning without any scruples. Then he looked at Lei Wuxian, who had a cold expression on his side, and asked, I wonder, Elder Lei Wuxian, am I right? Everyone also looked at Lei Wuxian. Lei Wuxian came back to his senses, nodded, and said, what Peak Master Xiao just said is right. If his physique is as I expected, he should be the Purple Sky Divine Thunder body. However, it has not been fully activated. The terrifying thunder and lightning pressure when fully activated is comparable to the anger of heaven. Even the strong martial emperor dare not touch it. Everyone looked shocked, what is martial emperor? But it is the pinnacle of the profound heaven continent realm. But Lei Wuxian said that the Zixiao divine thunder body was not fully activated, and even the martial emperor did not dare to touch it even half a cent. Doesn't this mean that the martial emperor will die at the first touch? Xiao Ran was really shocked by Lei Wuxian's statement. Lei Wuxian saw their surprised expressions and did not explain anything. It's up to them to believe it or not, because it's a fact in itself. After all, he is also a person with good physique, otherwise Qin Xian would not buy him out. Say it. The Qingling woman's voice sounded again. In the 94th match, the bloodthirsty inner disciple of Profound Heaven Sect challenges Yeqing, the inner disciple of Waxy Sect. The words fell. The crowd exclaimed and looked at each other in confusion. The bloodthirsty figure next to Yun Fengji disappeared and then appeared in the field. Yeqing and the bloodthirsty figure disappeared and appeared in the space. This old bloodthirsty guy wants to challenge Yeqing. Yun Fengji turned her beautiful eyes and murmured. It seems that you are still the same as before, you like to challenge geniuses. It just allows me to see the difference in strength between you and him. Xiao Ran and others naturally noticed it, but they didn't say anything. Since Bloodthirsty wanted to challenge him, they wouldn't stop him. In space, the two stood opposite each other. He looked at Yeqing with his bloodthirsty eyes and shouted, "Junior, your strength is worthy of my challenge. Don't hold back. Let me see how much damage you can do to me with all your strength." Yeqing frowned. "Junior, are you older than me?" There was doubt in my heart. Then he shook his head and his expression became serious. "Let him call you whatever you want." Yeqing's eyes flashed with lightning. He nodded and said, "I will meet your request." The words fell. Waves of thunder came from high in the sky. There is no external world, thunder appears in space. Boom. Boom boom boom. Boom. Looking at the incoming lightning, he smiled with bloodthirsty, and the will-o'-the-wisps in his hands continued to gather, forming a dark head, and threw it towards the incoming lightning. Crack! A wave of air swept through them, and the two of them took a few steps back. Yeqing raised his eyebrows and his eyes flickered slightly. This man has some strength. It seems that I have to use my true strength to fight him, otherwise I may lose today's competition. Then, using his skills, streaks of thunder light continuously crisscrossed and converged in his dantian. The next moment, the thunder light all over his body formed a pair of thunder wings. Yeqing stepped into the air and looked towards the bloodthirsty eyes with flashing thunder light. "Let you try this trick. Crush the thunderous army." Thunder and lightning gathered in his hands. Click. Boom. Yeqing punched out, and a fist shadow flashing with lightning instantly formed in the sky. The thunder fist that covered the sky and the sun struck in front of Bloodthirsty, as if the god of thunder was angry. Wherever he went, lightning was everywhere, and the space seemed unable to bear this thunder fist. "Come on, I want to taste how strong your fist is." Bloodthirsty was not afraid, but became extremely excited. Boom. The will-o'-the-wisps on his body turned into dark demons. Bloodthirsty waved forward, and the demon let out a jeering cry. Boom. Moment. The collision of the dim light and the blue light caused the void to vibrate, and the air waves continued to roll in. The fist shadow could not bear the erosion of the demon and slowly dissipated. The demon swallowed all the lightning and started screaming again, as if it had eaten something very delicious. The ghostly eyes like copper bells looked at Yeqing and rushed over. Yeqing's expression changed when he saw the attacking demon. He kept squeezing the spell in his hand to block it. Dark clouds filled the sky, and hundreds of giant thunder struck directly at the demon. Boom. The demon wanted to eat the giant thunder, but because his body couldn't bear it at all, it turned into powder and dissipated in the space. But it's not over yet. High in the sky, dark clouds and thunder were crisscrossed, and the remaining giant thunders turned around and rushed toward the bloodthirsty one. The lightning instantly penetrated the bloodthirsty body. Ah! The bloodthirsty face became distorted. Outside world. When everyone saw this scene, they knew that Yeqing had won. But, did he really win? No, no win. An unexpected scene appeared. Bloodthirsty directly resisted the lightning with his flesh and blood body. Although it hurt to look at his expression, from the beginning to the end, there was always a smile on his face. I don't know whether it was a smile of ridicule, a sneer, or a disdainful smile. Yeching couldn't understand, and neither could anyone. At this moment, a bloodthirsty voice reached Yeching's ears. "This thunder light can make me feel much better, but it's not enough. Next, I'll let you taste my will-o'-the-wisp." Groups of will-o'-the-wisps stopped wandering around Bloodthirsty, forming a huge dark demon. The demon's bottomless eyes glowed, and he looked up at Yeching and smiled gloomily. There were clouds of black mist spitting out from his mouth. This was poisonous gas. As long as the realm did not exceed too much, as long as it was contaminated a little, you would definitely die within half a quarter of an hour. Although the lightning was constantly paralyzing the bloodthirsty body and even getting stronger and stronger, he didn't care and insisted on gritting his teeth. He didn't really want to resist, but wanted to give this weapon a try. Can the body bear it? Thunder can't even kill him. This guy's body is so strong. It seems that Yeching has really met his opponent. There was a flurry of discussion from the outside world. Yeching's face turned pale, and he had used too much spiritual power. Even if he had the physical constitution, he couldn't bear it. Is it possible that I have to use my physical strength to fight against him? Yeching couldn't help but hear such a voice in his mind. But this idea was cut off by Yeching as soon as it came up. No, my physique cannot be completely exposed, not to mention that my current body cannot bear it. It seems that I have to use that trick to deal with him. Yeching's eyes narrowed. The words fell. I saw that high in the sky, the entire dark cloud slowly condensed into a whirlpool, and all the lightning continued to rush into the whirlpool. The next moment, an angry sound like a thunder god came. Boom! Ho ho! A thunder dragon appeared in the space with endless thunder light. Ho ho ho! This huge thunder dragon was seen by the outside world, and they couldn't help but lose resistance, with a look of fear in their eyes. It was as if they were participating in this competition. Profound Heaven Sect and others naturally saw this scene, and couldn't help but begin to doubt the bloodthirsty. Can he really withstand this thunder dragon? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 93. Generally speaking, when you advance to Martial Venerable, you will face the challenge of a thunder dragon, but this kid can actually summon a thunder dragon with his own power. It can't help but show how powerful this kid's talent is. I'm afraid even the daughter of the Palace Master of Heavenly Palace is incomparable. The people on the side nodded. It seems that a large group of geniuses have emerged from this 5-realm competition. This also means that the Tianqian secret realm will face challenges from many geniuses this time, and it will be more intense. That's for sure. Every Tianqian secret realm session is always intense. It's just that this time the competition will probably be much more intense than before. Well. Then he sighed again, but it's not our share, just take a look. Well, everyone nodded and did not speak to refute. In space, the Thunder Dragon and the Devil collided with each other. The sharp collision caused the entire space to shake, and even gave people a feeling of being broken. Boom! Turbulent air waves swept around. Seeing this, Yeching quickly used a defensive array to resist the air waves. Boom! But the bloodthirsty on the other side was not used. His cold face showed a crazy look. He did not hide, but directly used his body to hold the air wave. As expected, the bloodthirsty was able to withstand it, but there were a few scratches on his face, and the traces of blood flowing from the scratches made his face even more ferocious. Like a reincarnated killing god. Then he raised his excited eyes and looked at Yeching and said sternly, "Boy, your strength is not limited to this. Stop hiding it and show your true strength. Don't let me down. Although the thunder dragon you just made is strong, it is only limited to this. I feel that there is a very powerful force in your body that has not been used yet. So, don't wait any longer, use it and let me see it. Bloodthirsty stopped talking, hugged his chest and waited quietly for Yeching's reply. Yeching heard this, put away the magic circle, raised his eyes to look at Bloodthirsty, frowned, and thought to himself, although Tianqian's secret realm is very important to me, it's not time to use my physique yet. The second opponent I met has such a strong strength. Although the physical strength can defeat him, it will also cause some unnecessary trouble for myself. Yeching's eyes showed deep contemplation. It's too dangerous to expose your physique and bring yourself too much danger. If you lose, you lose. There is no chance next time. Say it. Yeching shook his head. Shouted, I surrender. When Bloodthirsty heard this, his eyes flashed with anger, and he rushed over, grabbed Yeching's neck, and yelled at him, are you giving up? Boy, I'm giving you a chance. Why don't you admit defeat? Are you disrespecting me? Hearing the bloodthirsty question, Yeching's expression did not change and he shook his head. Then the space disappeared and the two people appeared in the venue. Everyone in the outside world has seen such a wonderful scene, especially the big forces. Everyone's eyes were shining, as if they were admiring a rare treasure. Xiao Ran on the other side naturally saw them, with a trace of disdain on his lips. It seems that what Elder Lei Wuxian said is right. This man named Yeching does have a physique, but he hid it for some unknown reason and did not use it. Ling Gu came out and said. Lei Wuxian glanced at him and explained, that's because Zixiao God's thunder body is too tempting. If it is an ordinary thunder body, the outside world can praise him as a genius, but if the world is made aware of the existence of Zixiao God's thunder body, I am afraid that the guy hidden in the void will pop out. What this young man did, that's right, he's smart. When Xiao Ran heard this, he frowned and thought slightly. In all his life, he had never heard of the Zixiao divine thunder body. Perhaps only by finding ancient ruins can we know the function of Zixiao divine thunder body. And Yun Fenji, who was behind everyone, flashed her eyes. She does know a little bit about it. As a person who lived thousands of years ago, she naturally knows how powerful the Zixiao divine thunder body is. If the world thinks that the realm of Martial Emperor is very difficult to break through, but for those who possess the purple sky divine thunder body, it is as easy as eating and drinking. It is even said that even the legendary semi-immortal realm is easy for those with the purple sky divine thunder body. Although the physique is strong, it has advantages and disadvantages. This kind of physique can be forcibly taken away, which is a drawback, so people with this physique must never be exposed. If Yeching exposes this physique today, a war between emperors will happen today. This is not a joke, it is true. Yun Fenji smiled secretly, this old guy really has some bad intentions. Does he really want this man to use his physical strength? Subsequently, she looked at Yeching with beautiful eyes and praised, fortunately you are smart, otherwise you would have died here today. The winner this time is the bloodthirsty inner disciple of Profound Heaven Sect. The clear voice echoed in everyone's ears again. Only this time, there was no exclamation from everyone. Some are just constant conversations and discussions. I think in this 5-region competition, small sects like us should not have a share. Geniuses are really like gophers, popping up one by one. Look at this Yeching and this bloodthirsty one. They are all invincible beings at the same level. We went up to deliver food to him, so I decided okay, I won't participate in this competition, I'll just observe. The people around him couldn't help but nodded when they heard what he said. One person echoed him and said, you're right. We don't have a share in the 5 domains this time. It would be embarrassing to go up there. It's better to observe the fighting methods of these geniuses. Anyway, we can participate in the future. Yes, I decided not to participate either. Me too. One stone stirred up 1,000 waves, and some people kept saying that they would not participate. This was very painful for the elders of those powerful sects. It was really hard to cry, but there was nothing they could do. Geniuses kept emerging, extinguishing their hope of winning. In the 95th game, Fanki Sect General Yun challenges the bloodthirsty inner disciples of Profound Heaven Sect. As expected, this man named Zhang Yun was defeated in less than 2 rounds. Afterwards, the voices of clear-spirited women kept appearing, talking about bloodthirsty victory. The 154th game is played by Longquan Sect Saint Child Yang He, challenging the bloodthirsty inner disciples of Profound Heaven Sect. The words fell. 2 figures appeared on the field and emerged in the space. Yang He looked at the opposite side with a serious face, a trace of bloodthirsty look on his face, and the spiritual energy all over his body continued to spurt out. We must defeat him, otherwise he will be qualified for the Tianqian secret realm. This is not in the interest of our Longquan sect. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 94. The bloodthirsty person on the other side doesn't know what this person is talking about, and even if he does, he would be disdainful. This is the confidence that comes from strength. The cold face stared at the opposite person, his eyes brightened. Will-o'-the-wisps gather themselves and become dark demons. You ants, don't be embarrassed here, just step back, Bloodthirsty said coldly. The bloodthirsty and arrogant words made Yang He's face look angry. I couldn't help but curse secretly in my heart. I've won dozens of battles. You're so arrogant. A person from a rubbish place is just taking advantage of luck. I'll teach you a lesson later. The words fell. Yang He yelled at the sky. Red wind. Whizzing. Xiao xiao. Groups of violent storms appeared. Where the storm appeared, it actually caused a small crack in the nearby space. Although it was small, it was certain that this storm was enough to mince a person with low strength into pieces. The storm turned into a shape similar to a tornado and headed towards Bloodthirsty. Whizzing. The fierce storm caused the demonic aura in front of Bloodthirsty to drop by 1 stage. Shue raised his eyebrows when he saw the scene and said, "It's a bit interesting, but that's it? Say it." With a wave of his bloodthirsty palm, the will-o'-the-wisp fire all over his body was continuously injected into the demon's body. The aura that the demon had just lost came back and became more powerful. Ah! The demon shouted and rushed towards Yang He. At the moment when the demon comes into contact with the storm, the demon's whole body turned into traces of black mist, and then it rotated counterclockwise along the storm and came out. The black mist merged into one again and turned into a demon. There was a mocking look on the demon's unclear face. Then he rushed in front of Yang He and turned into black mist again, shrouding him. The shroud of black mist prevented the outside world from seeing clearly what was inside, and they could only hear painful sounds coming from inside. The next moment, Yang He's body was thrown out by the demon. Yang He lay on the ground in a miserable state, his face turned pale, and he no longer had the strength to stand up. This made some people wonder if he was being drained. Shue looked disdainful when he saw this scene. The black mist gathers again and turns into a demon. The demon Jija smiled slyly, walked up to Yang He, opened his bottomless mouth, and prepared to swallow him whole. Yang He showed a look of fear and kept struggling with his hands and feet, but all the strength and spiritual power in his body had been absorbed by the demon, and he could not move even 1 step no matter how hard he struggled. Not far away, Bloodthirsty frowned when he saw this scene. He couldn't let the demon do this, wave his hand. Click. Something seemed to break, and the demon dissipated. Although Bloodthirsty is exciting, he has a rational mind and knows what the occasion is and cannot go on a killing spree here. You must and should find a place where no one is around. Outside world. The elders of the Longquan sect wiped away cold sweat and slowly exhaled. They thought this bloodthirsty man would kill him, but he scared them so much. Fortunately, they calmed down at the last moment, otherwise they wouldn't know how to explain to the sect leader. Although Yang He was just an ordinary disciple in the eyes of outsiders, it was different in their eyes. These elders knew that Yang He had another identity, that is, he was the only son of Yang Qingyun, one of the 8 great enshrinements in the palace today. The leader of the Longquan sect is Yang He's uncle. If Yang He died here today, you can imagine how serious the consequences would be. Bloodthirsty and indifferent, he walked up to Yang He and said in a cold voice, "You are lucky today. I will spare your life this time. Next time, you should first understand what kind of strength you have before challenging you. Otherwise, it will be the same as you are now. You are a useless piece of shit." Yang He's face was pale as he looked at the bloodthirsty man, and he kept panting, unable to say a word. The surrounding space began to disappear, and the 2 figures appeared in the field. As soon as Yang He came out, he was immediately taken away by several strong martial saints. Bloodthirsty still had an indifferent look on his face, standing in the field with his hands folded across his chest, looking at everyone with disdain and provocation in his eyes. This appearance naturally aroused the anger of a large group of people. But he still calmed down and did not go up to challenge him. After all, his strength was not enough, and he would only get beaten if he went up. The winner of this battle is the bloodthirsty inner disciple of Profound Heaven Sect. Fall alive. The people in Profound Heaven Sect in the distance instantly attracted the attention of a large group of forces. Some disciples looked embarrassed at being watched by so many people, but a few didn't think so. Each of them looked proud and puffed out their chests, as if they were enjoying this feeling. "Old guy, you are a little too arrogant, don't you know you are being targeted?" Yun Fenji couldn't help but shook her head when she saw this scene. She won't show a happy expression. Thousands of years of experience have allowed her to control her expression. Yun Fenji frowned. There was an extremely powerful person nearby. His talent was definitely not inferior to theirs, and was even stronger. He turned his head and looked at a man in the distance. The man was dressed in black, standing in the wind, his jet black hair fluttering in the wind, and his dark eyes were full of indifference on his face that was as sharp as an axe. "It's like standing there, you are already in the cold. I wonder which sect this person is from." I felt an extremely strong sense of oppression on him. "I haven't had this feeling for many years," Yun Fenji murmured. Ling Wu, who was beside him, heard the voice, turned his head and looked at her and asked, "What's wrong? Do you feel a strong enemy?" Hearing Ling Wu's question, Yun Fenji did not look back. She pointed at the man going away with her hand and said, "Great Elder, look at the man over there." Ling Wu raised his eyes and looked in the direction pointed by Yun Fenji. Instantly, I felt a mysterious aura coming towards me. He frowned slightly, looked at Yun Fenji and said, "Are you saying this person is a threat to us?" Yun Fenji nodded, "Yes, I feel a mysterious aura on him, but I can't guess it. But, I am certain that he is the only one among all the forces who poses a threat to my Profound Heaven Sect. My opinion is that the bloodthirsty guy should be restrained. His approach has already attracted some powerful people. Otherwise I'm afraid." Hearing Yun Fenji's words, Ling Wu nodded without saying anything, his eyes lost in thought. Lei Wuxian on the other side naturally heard the conversation between the two, and the lightning in his eyes flashed slightly. He had been paying attention to the man they were talking about for a long time. During this competition, he had developed 9 spirit partitioning consciousnesses and was always paying attention to the man's expression and next move. Yun Fenji was right, this person was the hard rock for their 5-region competition, and they had to find a way to get over it. Thinking of this, Lei Wuxian disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 95. In the void, Nan Xiao stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the image in front of him. He has seen all of Bloodthirsty's performance in dozens of games. He nodded, chuckled, and said, "The geniuses in this competition are several times more than those in previous competitions. Yeching just appeared, and now there is a bloodthirsty one. They are both invincible beings at the same level. It makes me want to accept them as my disciples." If Nan Xiao just said that accepting Yeching as his disciple was just a joke, now he has a serious look on his face. Yeching's calmness and the power of controlling thunder made Nan Xiao impressed, and his bloodthirsty domineering and invincible posture made him even more amazed. He. Magnolia on the side walked over, put her slender jade hand to her mouth, and smiled slightly. Then he walked to Nan Xiao, touched his shoulders with both hands and said, "Lord Territory Lord, don't worry about this. The slave family believes that all the geniuses in this 5-region competition will be in the possession of my heavenly palace. After all, as the Territory Lord, you don't want to accept them as your disciples. As long as you say something, even if you ask them to be your dog, they will definitely be willing." What Yulan said was indeed correct. Some idiots would indeed be praised by the powerful martial emperor. Nan Xiao laughed and nodded, he really appreciated the sentence. Then he turned around, looked at Magnolia's charming lips, lifted her chin, leaned against her ear, exhaled, and said softly, "As long as they perform well this time, my heavenly palace will take it into their hands and provide for me. Seek blessings from heavenly palace in the future." Yulan nodded with her cheeks slightly red, like a little kitten. Nan Xiao looked at her appearance, a little amused, and left her, turned around again, put his hands behind his back, and said in a deep voice, "According to the news from the Tiangong, a big shot from the upper world is coming soon. Palace Master her old man also specifically told me that if there are some extremely talented geniuses in this competition, they will be recruited into the heavenly palace at any cost, and they can ask for whatever they want, as long as it is not too excessive. As long as I recruit more talented people in this competition, I believe that the Lord of the Palace will praise me, and I can also talk to the big shots in the world and let me get in touch with that realm." Speaking of this, Nan Xiao finally looked at Yulan affectionately and said, "This way we don't have to stay in the ghost place of Profound Heaven continent to practice. Instead, we can go to the upper world to explore. Then I will establish there is a transcendent level force that knows everything. I am the king myself, so why should I work hard for them? Do you think it's Yulan?" Nan Xiao looked at Yulan with a smile. Yulan didn't speak, she leaned into his arms and nodded. She is not qualified to talk about this kind of thing, just listen to it. Then the sound of bloodthirsty victory sounded again in the field. Only this time, except for the disciples, everyone in Profound Heaven Sect watched the scene with frowning eyes, and couldn't help but glance at the man just now. At this time, the man no longer had that indifferent expression, but his eyes had a hint of fighting intent. The display of bloodthirst has aroused the blood in the man's heart and made his brain start to get excited. Seeing this scene, Ling Gu also knew that he should stop, and then he raised his hands to the leader Xiao Ran and said, "Peak Master, you can let the bloodthirsty come down now, let Yun Fenji go up for the next game. After all, he has met the bloodthirsty requirements to enter the Tianqian secret realm." Xiao Ran nodded when he heard this. Yun Fenji turned around, looked behind and said, "Fenyi, then it's up to you to play. Remember to be careful. If you can't beat him, just admit defeat. This is not a shameful thing." Yun Fenji's expression changed, she put her hands together and said, "Thank you Peak Master and Great Elder for your concern." Then her face started to turn cold, she had to win. On the other side, Bloodthirsty, who was on the field, glanced at everyone with a proud face. Just when he was about to make a loud provocation again, Ling Gu's voice sounded in his mind. "Okay, you have used your prestige enough, and you have met the requirements of Tianqian's secret realm. Let Yun Fenji take charge of the next battle." Hearing this, Shui raised his eyes to look at Xiaoran and others, and nodded in agreement. Immediately walked out of the field. This approach made those who didn't want to challenge have some thoughts. After all, the strong ones have left, now it's time for them to take the stage, right? There is no way this small sect still has a genius like Bloodthirsty. After a few breaths, Yun Fengji walked up. Everyone outside the court looked at her. They looked stunned for a moment, and a beautiful woman appeared in their eyes. She has a stunning face, with an unbreakable coldness between her brows, as cold as frost and as cold as the wind. She is wearing an ice blue dress like the legendary Crystal Princess. Her long hair flutters in the wind, her beautiful eyes are so coveted, her appearance is like jade, her grace is as graceful as her grace, and she is as beautiful as a fairy who fell into the mortal world by mistake. Is this, also a person from Profound Heaven Sect? Why is this woman so beautiful? Her beauty is just like the legendary blooming violet flower. But it's a pity that she doesn't belong to me. How painful it is. Everyone. This is what everyone thinks. In the crowd. Naturally, the man also saw this scene, his brows relaxed, and a smile appeared on his indifferent face, as if he was admiring something beautiful. The figure moved and appeared in the venue. Everyone's eyes naturally turned to the man. Who is he? Why do I feel a sense of oppression on him? Suanman. Zhang Xuanyi frowned and looked at the man. The several elders beside him naturally noticed his expression. He didn't speak, but looked up at the two people in the field. The Qingling woman's voice echoed in everyone's ears. The 160th match, Independent Cultivator Gong Mo challenges Profound Heaven Sect inner disciple Yun Fengji. The words fell. The two disappeared from the spot and entered the space. How is that possible? This man is an independent cultivator. A young man exclaimed, and his majestic voice attracted everyone around him. Impossible. How could an independent cultivator come here? Does he have an invitation? Why can he come to participate in the 5 Realms competition? With doubtful expressions, everyone couldn't help but start to look at the powerful people. They believed that these powerful people must know something. An old man saw their questioning expressions and explained aloud, it's true that he is an independent cultivator, but he also received the invitation to participate. I want to tell everyone that the 5 Realms competition is not just for you group of forces. And will also give some independent cultivators with top talents who can be taken in by any force, so please be patient and read on. Say it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 96. Everyone didn't say anything else and carefully observed the two people fighting in the image. In space. Click, click, click. Boom. Boom. I saw Yun Fengji's hands constantly resisting Gong Mo's fierce attack, and a trace of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Before the two of them entered the space, Gong Mo didn't say anything to Yun Fengji, and rushed forward as if he wanted to end the battle quickly. Bang bang. Yun Fengji stepped back. She frowned and her beautiful eyes twinkled slightly. During the fight, Yun Fengji also gradually realized that this person was stronger than her, at least reaching the peak level of martial sovereign. There was nothing he could do about being crushed by Gong Mo after all, Yun Fengji's own strength was only at the peak of the martial king. Another one is Gong Mo's identity. His predecessor was the immortal venerable in the upper realm. He was besieged by 3 strong men of the same level and was helplessly reborn in the lower realm. Now he has some memory loss and fights completely based on instinct. Amid Gong Mo's non-stop attacks, Yun Fengji stepped back while blocking, her beautiful eyes constantly scanning Gong Mo's weaknesses. After half an hour of fighting, Yun Fengji finally discovered her weakness and showed a smile. It seems that you have completely given up your physical body and cultivated all your powerful martial arts. However, your weaknesses are everywhere, Yun Fengji murmured. Then, he narrowed his eyes slightly, raised his hand to block Gong Mo's fist, the sword in his hand flashed with golden light, and shouted softly. Kifeng Mingzhan. Chirp. A phoenix shadow surrounded the sword light and rushed towards Gong Mo. Swish. Gong Mo moved, retreated to a distance, formed seals with his hands, and said a bunch of strange spells. In an instant, a crack opened in the nearby space, and a jade sword with ancient runes flew out. An old and prehistoric aura rushed toward Yun Fengji's face. Gong Mo raised his eyes and saw his spiritual energy burst out. He moved his steps, jumped up and grabbed the jade sword, and his eyes were sharp. A turn. A terrifying sword blade struck out towards Yun Fengji. Aha! The phoenix shadow was directly destroyed. Gong Mo struck out hundreds of sword blades again. Swish, swish, swish. The sword blade rushed towards Yun Fengji like lightning. Yun Fengji looked at the hundreds of sword blades in the sky and frowned. My whole body was shaken. Spiritual energy splashes out. A phoenix shadow appeared behind him. Chirp. The phoenix shadow screamed and rushed forward with endless golden light. Boom. The two collide. Wherever the phoenix passed, all the sword blades were destroyed one by one. Seeing this, Gong Mo began to frown, and his index and middle fingers crossed the jade sword. Buzz. At that moment, the runes on the jade sword seemed to come alive. I saw the runes slowly forming a dark yellow dragon. The giant dragon swung its tail and charged towards the phoenix. Roar. Boom. Boom. Turbulent air waves swept around the space. The two figures kept dodging. Before Gong Mo could react, Yun Fengji's spiritual energy continued to gather. That moment. In the sky, dozens of hundreds of phoenix shadows appeared instantly, and everyone in the outside world felt the terrifying pressure. A huge roar echoed throughout the space. Outside world. A scene of several men and women talking to each other. What kind of move is this? A woman looked shocked. Does the dozens of phoenix shadows kill him? A man beside him exclaimed. In his opinion, this is just looking for death. Although it is a phantom, it cannot be summoned like this. I don't know. In my opinion, to summon dozens of phoenix shadows, you need at least 90% of your spiritual power, but this fairy summoned the phoenix and it seems like there is no problem at all. He couldn't help but look confused. Only a few old men from Suanman and Gu Sect saw the clues. This girl is extraordinary. She should be hiding something terrifying like that man. A white-haired old man murmured. In space. The phantom of the phoenix had already rushed in front of Gong Mo. Everyone saw it and couldn't help but answer in their hearts. He can't stop it? But the facts disappointed them again. I saw a flash of light on Gong Mo's chest, and a large amount of spiritual power continued to gather together. The next moment, a giant dragon leaping out of the sky. Ouch! Ho ho ho! The giant dragon kept roaring, its eyes fixed on the approaching shadow, and it charged forward with a swish of its tail. A real dragon fights hundreds of phoenixes, a scene like this that is rarely seen. But it is a pity that the battle between phantoms will never be as good as that between real phoenixes and real dragons. If it were true, let alone fighting, even if they collided with each other, the entire profound heaven continent would not be able to withstand the fury of the divine beasts. Unless it's the upper realm, because only the laws of the upper realm can suppress the divine beasts. The heavenly path of profound heaven continent has begun to become dilapidated, and it can no longer withstand the fight of the divine beasts. Bang bang bang. The constant roar of dragons and the cry of phoenixes came, and the phoenixes died one after another. The real dragon hovered high in the sky, and a pair of dragon eyes looked at the phoenix with disdain. Phoenix's death made Yun Fengji start to bite back. My own aura can no longer support it? Yun Fengji's face was a little pale. The reason why she could summon so many phoenixes was because she had one phoenix essence and blood. Without blood essence, it would be difficult for her to summon two phoenixes. No. On the other side, Gong Amo looked a little anxious and murmured, "If this continues, I won't be able to bear it. It must be finished with one strike." Gong Mo's expression was hard, but he was a little helpless. Shaking his head, "I can't guess her strength. It's too difficult to finish her off with one blow." Thinking of this, Gong Amo began to think deeply. He raised his eyes to look at Yun Fengji, who was struggling to hold on, and said secretly, "She should also have a treasure on her chest that can rival me. Looking at the look on her face, she probably won't be able to hold on much longer. Say it." Gong Amo stepped forward and rushed forward, punching him with a powerful punch. Yun Fengji was knocked back before she could react. His throat squirmed and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He raised his eyes, staring at Gong Amo with his beautiful eyes, and rushed forward. Bang bang bang. The battle between swords begins at this moment. The sword light radiated everywhere, and the space was filled with traces of the sword blade. Aha! Gong Amo struck down with his sword, and Yun Fengji took a few steps back. Gong Amo took this opportunity to use that move. "Master of my sword." Gong Amo gave a low drink. "The words have fallen." The jade sword in his hand began to tremble slightly, as if something terrifying was about to come out. Next moment, the jade sword began to slowly break into pieces until it turned into a man whose face could not be seen clearly and exuded a terrifying aura. His own powerful sword intense soared into the sky, and the sky outside couldn't help but become dark. Dark clouds are rolling and lightning is shining. This makes everyone puzzled. With a bang, a terrifying giant thunder struck directly into the field. Dust and smoke were everywhere, and a daoist figure stood with his hands behind his back, a pair of deep eyes staring high into the sky, and his terrifying aura overwhelmed the whole place. The crowd burst into exclamations. "It's Nan Xiao. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system." Author, Red General. Chapter 97. This is the Lord of the Realm. He is worthy of being a strong man in the Emperor Realm world. He can catch the attack of a giant thunder with his bare hands, one person murmured. "Do you know what happened with the huge thunder just now?" the man asked the people around him. The man shook his head, spread his hands and said, "How can I know? Maybe the two of them have great talents that make God jealous, so they sent down thunder tribulation." Everyone. Profound Heaven Sect. Xiao Ran stared at this scene, frowning, and said to himself, "How could this happen? Is it possible that the battle between the two attracted the attention of Heavenly Dao?" Xiao Ran thought for a while and shook his head, "No, this is not common sense at all. Is it just because of their talents?" Xiao Ran looked confused for a while. Ling Gu stood aside, not knowing what to say. After all, he had never seen these before. In space. Yun Fengji looked at the tall, divine figure in front of her, her brows furrowed. What is this? Could it be that the feeling of pressure before was caused by this thing? Yun Fengji's eyes fell into deep thought. Gong Amo, who was opposite, didn't pay attention to what Yun Fengji was thinking, and shouted, "The first move of the sword god, burning shat." Boom. A giant sword that holds the sky appears in the hands of the sword god. The sword god's eyes glowed brightly and he looked towards Yun Fengji. The blazing golden light made Yun Fengji unable to open her eyes. His body kept retreating, and after reaching a certain point, he reluctantly opened his eyes. But at this moment, she felt a sense of heat all over her body, as if her heart was being burned by a hot flame. In an instant, a large amount of fragrant sweat was discharged from the body, and the clothes were completely soaked. The beautiful and seductive figure is also perfectly displayed at this moment. Snow-white skin, slender jade legs, and the looming white rabbit. This can make everyone outside see their noses bleed. He stared at the scene intently, as if he wanted to see something. Asshole, your clothes are soaked with sweat. Yun Fengji's face turned ugly. Although she was not afraid of her body being exposed, the feeling of being humiliated was not comfortable at all. From this moment on, Yun Fengji was really angry. She stopped in her steps and the sword in her hand kept flashing with golden light, as if responding to her master's anger. And high in the sky, a sword light rushed toward her with invincible momentum. Yun Fengji did not dodge, and the sword plunged straight into the ground. In the body, the phoenix essence and blood are constantly stimulating, and its own spiritual power is continuously supplied to the sword. The next moment, 100-foot-long phoenix appeared in front of the two of them. The phoenix flew high into the sky, circled around the center, and instantly transformed into a human form, turning into a magnificent and beautiful woman. Fen Nu looked at the approaching sword light with a calm expression on her face. With a move of the slender jade hand, the sword light shattered without any warning. When Gong Mo saw this scene, he frowned, and his cold face finally showed some emotion. He looked at Yun Fengji with a strange expression. Yun Fengji naturally noticed this scene, but she didn't speak. The humiliation just now was so insulting that it had already made her angry. If she didn't vent her anger, would she be considered the former Nine Phoenix Empress? Come and take a few moves from me first. The words have fallen. Fen Nu's eyes glowed with a golden light. The next moment, hundreds of phoenixes appeared around Fen Nu. All of them have amazing momentum. Fen Nu showed a trace of compassion on her face, as if she was praying. The phoenix around him instantly became impatient as he waved his jade hand. His phoenix eyes looked at the real dragon and the sword god on the other side, and let out a little chirp. Chirp. Choo choo choo. This was a declaration of war, and then he waved his wings and rushed over. The real dragon on the opposite side seemed to have autonomous consciousness. Without Gong Mo's instructions, it formed a fireball of 100 feet in its mouth and shot it at the vital parts of many phoenixes. Boom! Fire clouds filled the sky. One after another, the phoenixes screamed and died one after another. The real dragon destroyed more than 20 phoenixes with just one blow, which was enough to show how powerful the real dragon summoned by Gong Yun was. The sword god was still standing aside without any movement. After all, he had no independent consciousness. Seeing this, Gong Mo looked at Yun Fengji in the distance and shouted, "Just give up? You can't beat me due to the difference in strength. You only have the peak level of martial king, and I have reached the peak level of martial sovereign. Although the gap is not big for your talent, for you now, it is a huge gap. It's hard for you to cross over." Gong Mo shook his head. "Besides, you Profound Heaven Sect already have the opportunity to enter the Tianqian secret realm, why bother to win a second time? Don't you understand that you can bite off more than you can chew?" Yun Fengji glanced at him coldly, and the phoenix essence and blood in her dantian continued to be instilled. She already knows that this battle has been lost. But she didn't want to lose in such an embarrassing way. Surrendering was not his usual style. Even if he lost, he had to lose in a more exciting way. This is her pride as the empress in her previous life. Then his hands moved. Fen Nu raised her eyes to look at the real dragon and the sword god standing in front of her. Moving her slender jade feet, she walked over. "Every time you take a step, golden light will appear under your feet." The attacking phoenix followed suit and all returned to her body. Seeing this situation, Gong Mo knew that there was no need to say any more. His face turned cold and he said, "Since you are so stubborn, I will satisfy you. The power of the real dragon is not something that a drop of your phoenix blood can resist." The words have fallen. The real dragon hovering high in the sky roared. Ho ho ho! The deafening roar of the dragon resounded throughout the entire space. The real dragon swung its tail and rushed towards Fen Nu with a very clear purpose. Boom! Fen Nu instantly collided with the real dragon one after another. The terrifying aura made everyone outside think that this was not a battle between Martial King and Martial Sovereign at all, but Wuzong. Gradually, the space could no longer withstand the attacks of the two and began to slowly collapse. Nan Xiao, who was in the middle of the field, naturally felt it too. A hint of cold light shot out from his deep eyes. The figure disappeared instantly, and Nan Xiao appeared in the space. Looking at the scene in front of him, Nan Xiao waved his hand and the space instantly collapsed. The two figures appeared in the venue instantly. As for Fen Nu, Zhen Long, and Sword God, they have been destroyed by Nan Xiao. This approach made everyone present look a little confused. What does this mean? Is it a draw? Nan Xiao naturally felt the expressions of everyone and said nothing. He turned to look at the two men and said softly, "Have you had enough fighting? The battle between you two is not between Martial King and Martial Sovereign. I'm afraid it's between the strong Li and Wuzong. It will take root in the hands of both of you." Hearing the compliment, Yun Fenji nodded slightly but said nothing. As for Gong Mo, he didn't nod his head, his face didn't change, and he didn't know whether he listened or not. When Nan Xiao saw the two people's expressions, he was not angry at all. Instead, he laughed happily and said, "You two are really interesting." Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 98. Geniuses must have some arrogance, and Nan Xiao likes geniuses with arrogance. Can a genius without arrogance still be considered a genius? Say it. Nan Xiao didn't say anything else. He turned around, looked at everyone with a serious face, and said loudly, "In this competition, I believe you have seen the battle between little girl Yun Fenji and little brother Gong Mo. The fight between the two made the space unbearable and began to collapse, so the domain master decided that in this competition, the two would not have to fight a second time, but would directly gain the right to enter the Tianqian secret realm. Do you have anything to say?" The words have fallen. Everyone looked at Nan Xiao's eyes and shook their heads quickly, not daring to say anything else. Only the top forces such as Gu Sect, Xian Sect, and Black Demon Sect understood the meaning. Nan Xiao just wanted to take this opportunity to make friends with Gong Mo and Yun Fenji. This also meant that the two of them had been booked by Tiangong and no one could snatch them away. This made those old men look ugly and didn't know what to say. After all, it was a bit too selfish for the two of them to have such talents taken away by the heavenly palace. This is what the major forces are thinking, and they can only pretend to be angry on the surface. There is no way, who makes his own strength inferior to Tiangong. To be honest, the real purpose of the Five Realms competition is nothing more than to compete for talents and select disciples, but some people can't see it, and instead they regard it as an honor to brag to others. In ancient times, there was no so-called five-domain competition. It was just a tool created by major forces to recruit talents. If your force has a strong martial saint, then I will send a strong martial emperor to suppress you. If it is the Wuzong, then I will give you some benefits and let you persuade the disciples to join us. If you really can't, then just open the big one. Let them become our affiliated sect with some benefits. No one can resist this temptation. The fantasy world is a place where strength is supreme. If you are weak, you deserve to be bullied and suppressed. And Xiao Ran naturally understood the meaning, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, whether it was a sneer or a ridicule. He hated this in his previous life, and he was even more disgusted when he saw the scene in this life. Only Ling Gu stood aside quietly without speaking. But there were not as many disciples behind them as Xiao Ran and the others thought, and they couldn't help but start cheering. Only Huo Yi and Xue Xiang looked at each other, understood the meaning and did not speak. Yun Fenji in the field naturally understood the meaning, but she also pretended not to understand at all. Playing with the background, right? It's not like I, Profound Heaven Sect, don't have top experts behind me. Say it. Lei Wuxian's figure emerged in the darkness, and his lightning gleaming eyes stared at the scene coldly. A shadow emerged behind him. It is Digu, the master of the law enforcement hall. Lei Wuxian and Digu are the strong men who protect everyone in Profound Heaven Sect this time. Did the master say anything? Lei Wuxian asked. The figure walked out and replied, the master told us that as long as we get 3 places in the Tianqian secret realm, if we exceed 3, we will give in immediately. Lei Wuxian nodded, 3 are almost here. Bloodthirsty and Yun Fenji have been obtained. The last one left is up to Master Xiao's apprentice. Having said this, Lei Wuxian asked again, Master, have you sent any strong men here? After all, the current situation is not optimistic. Seeing Nan Xiao on the stage, you can understand that he is going to steal the disciples of Profound Heaven Sect, and the 2 of them cannot stop him. The gap in strength is too big. Digu nodded and replied, the master said that he sent a strong man at the peak level of half-emperor. When we encounter an enemy that we cannot deal with, he will come out. Half-emperor? Lei Wuxian's eyes flashed, a half-emperor level expert was enough. As long as Nan Xiao doesn't take action, a peak half-emperor level expert will be invincible here. There is no peak half-emperor in the entire field, at most they are half-emperors of the 7th layer. The words fell. Lei Wuxian glanced at Digu, who nodded and disappeared into the darkness. Lei Wuxian looked at Nan Xiao who was standing in the center of the martial arts field, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and the figure disappeared, returning to Profound Heaven Sect behind Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran also felt his aura and knew what Lei Wuxian was doing, so he didn't go over to ask. After all, the next battle was crucial. Subsequently, Gong Mo and Yun Fenji in the field retreated. Seeing this, Nan Xiao waved his body and disappeared, and the 5-region competition continued normally. The 161st match is between Huo Yi, an inner disciple of Profound Heaven Sect, and Jun Hao, a direct disciple of Tiangong. Jun Hao. In the crowd, one person read this name in confusion, as if he was thinking of something. He exclaimed, isn't he Jun Hao who won the first place in the Tiangong competition? Oh. A man came over and asked, brother, can you explain a little more clearly? The latter glanced at the former, nodded, and said, Tiangong Jun Hao, you don't know. Then do you know who is behind him? Everyone shook their heads. One person looked a little anxious and shouted, speak quickly, stop showing off. Seeing how powerful this man was, the man quickly said, the identity behind him is the younger brother of Junlin, one of the 8 great worshippers. You always know King's Landing. Everyone nodded. Junlin is a powerful martial emperor. And his younger brother Junhao has reached the martial sovereign 3rd layer at the age of 19. He is one of the dark horses in this 5-region competition. As I expected, he will definitely succeed this time. Win. Everyone nodded and said nothing. After such a long period of observation, they also realized that no matter what your identity is, you ultimately rely on your own strength, and all identities are fictitious. The words fell. The 2 figures appeared in the field and then appeared in the space. Jun Hao had a hint of arrogance in his expression, and a hint of contempt between his brows. Huo Yi, the inner disciple of Profound Heaven Sect, Jun Hao asked contemptuously, as if the few games Profound Heaven Sect won just now were as if he had not won. Huo Yi frowned. He didn't like this person's tone, but he still nodded and said, yes, it's me. Snored. A sect that has a lot of luck actually got 2 opportunities to enter the Tianqian secret realm. I really don't know how Zhang Xuanyi did it. If they meet me, I will definitely knock them down. Huo Yi didn't speak, with a look of disdain on his face. He felt that this person was mentally ill. According to what he knew, Junhao's own strength was only Martial Sovereign third layer, and Gong Mo had already reached the peak of Martial Sovereign. Take Realm as an example, the two are not on the same level, let alone the gap in strength. I really don't know how Junhao had the nerve to say it. This made Huoyi wonder if he was spoiled by his family. My brain was also filled with water. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 99. Huoyi raised his eyes and looked at Junhao, and said coldly, "Stop talking nonsense. If you are good at talking, you might as well have a few moves with me first and let me see how strong you are. Do you deserve what you just said?" When Junhao heard this, he smiled disdainfully, stretched out 3 fingers and said, "I can defeat you in 3 moves without any effort. How can you be my opponent when you have just broken through the strength of the Martial King?" Junhao sneered. "Road." He shouted lowly, "Take advantage of my young master's move first." The words fell. Junhao's whole body burst out with aura, and waves of spiritual power wrapped around his fists. When the spiritual power was almost gathered, he waited until it was almost done. Junhao's face turned cold and he punched out directly. Boom! The mighty fist shadow was like a fierce dragon crossing the river, charging straight towards Huoyi with an invincible momentum. The fist wind was less than 1 centimeter closer to Huoyi, that moment. Huoyi couldn't react in time, and his body flew out directly. He rolled 3 times before he managed to stand up and touched his chest. Cough. Ahem. Huoyi coughed slightly, his brows furrowed, his face pale, and there was a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth. Looking at the pool of blood on the side, he knew that he had just vomited a mouthful of blood. Damn it, the difference in strength is so big that I can't even catch a single move, Huoyi said secretly. Snort. Junhao looked a little mocking, crossed his arms and said, "Boy, weren't you quite arrogant just now? Why are you like this now? Didn't you say you still want to fight with your grandfather and me?" Sounds of ridicule resounded in Huoyi's ears. "It's really funny. I said I'll kill you within 3 moves. It's only within 3 moves. I've only made the first move and you can't catch it, let alone my second move. Let me see if you can hold on with your next move, but don't die. Fall alive." Junhao didn't say any more nonsense, and his expression instantly turned cold. Opening his palm, a red flame appeared. The spiritual energy nearby slowly gathered, and the next moment it turned into a 10-foot-long fire dragon. The fire dragon roared and surrounded Junhao, like a human emperor. Especially Junhao's expression showed a hint of contempt for the world, and he didn't regard others as human beings at all. The terrifying momentum of the fire dragon rushed straight towards Huoyi. Boom! Huoyi was so suppressed by this momentum that he half knelt on the ground, gasping for air. Outside world. Profound Heaven Sect. Everyone looked a little ugly and began to worry about Huoyi. Xiao Ran, who was a Taoist, furrowed his brows and looked deep when he saw this scene. In fact, he has no confidence in Huoyi Ben. The gap between Martial King Martial Sovereign is too big, unless he is a genius like Yun Fengji, he is about the same. Huoyi may be considered a genius, but his path to Martial Dao came too late, and everyone else's path to Martial Dao was much earlier than him. This also means that he is now 19 years old and his strength is still only at the Martial King level. Behind everyone. Naturally, Yun Fengji and Bloodthirsty also saw this scene. The bloodthirsty expression didn't change at all, as if the matter had nothing to do with him. Only Yun Fengji's expression became a little worried. He had quite good senses about Huoyi. From the time she joined Profound Heaven Sect to now, Yun Fengji has slowly returned to her heart. The sect rules of Profound Heaven Sect bring him a very comfortable feeling. Maybe there will be a little bullying here, but it doesn't matter, because if caught by the law enforcement hall, he will be severely punished. The sect rules of Profound Heaven Sect can be clearly marked. Bye-bye, if the other party doesn't agree to fight with you and you insist on fighting, then you have violated the sect's rules. It can range from abolishing cultivation and turning one into a useless person, or it can range from outright killing to death. The sect rules of Profound Heaven Sect are quite humane to her. She is very satisfied with this rule. From the beginning to now, he has been a member of the Profound Heaven section like Xiao Ran. He has returned to his heart in the dark. Yun Fengtian himself didn't know why this happened. This is actually the result of the system. The skills they practice will make them turn to the Profound Heaven Sect and be loyal to him. In space, the fire dragon circled around Junhao, raised its head, and stared directly at Huoyi with its flaming eyes. Not to be outdone, Huoyi looked directly at each other. The blazing firelight made it difficult for him to open his eyes. The fire dragon opposite was just like Junhao's temperament. He didn't like others looking at me like this, so he roared, and then rushed forward with a tail swish. The flames were billowing, and everywhere they went, there were traces of burning. Huoyi trembled all over, feeling the danger of death. He wanted to forcefully drag away the spiritual pressure, but his strength was far from enough. The coercion had already suppressed him and made him unable to move at all. Now he had become a living target. Next moment. Boom. Aha. The fire dragon brought violent flames and penetrated Huoyi's chest directly. The flames continued to burn Huoyan's body, and a trace of burnt smell spread in the space. The blood also gushes out like a flood, like a dam without a gate. Cough. Ahem. Huoyi spit out a mouthful of blood. His legs went weak and he collapsed directly on the ground, his hair hanging around his body. The piercing pain had already caused his face to distort, his limbs to tremble, and his face to turn pale, but he gritted his teeth and persisted, trying not to let out painful groans. Suddenly, a severe dizziness came from Huoyi's mind. He couldn't help but want to sleep, and his body gradually began to shake. He wanted to sleep but couldn't. The eyes opened and closed again. No, I can't fall asleep. Once I fall asleep, I will really die. Bang bang bang. Huoyi kept slapping himself, but the effect was minimal. He became so cruel that he bit the base of his tongue and spit out a mouthful of blood to wake himself up. This feeling of dizziness and being unable to sleep made him feel that the punishment in the 18th level of hell would not be as painful. A deist figure stepped in front of him, with a hint of ridicule on his face. He leaned over and looked at Huoyi's pale face, and said with a smile, "You can't even catch my fire dragon, but you still want to fight with me? Ha ha ha. Let's see what kind of strength you have. Ha ha ha, don't do it anymore, hold on, close your eyes and go to sleep." Ha 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 ha, Junhao laughed loudly. The whole space echoed with his wild laughter. The expression of Huoyi, who was kneeling on the ground, did not change at all, because the bone-piercing pain made it impossible for him to make any useful expression. Raising his head slightly, he looked at the sky full of stars and couldn't help but laugh at himself. Sure enough, I can't make up for the gap in strength. I'm still too confident. Huoyi shook his head. Say it. Time passed slowly like this. From now on, he has been laughing at him, but he is not ready to take the next step. Junhao's goal has been achieved. He just wanted to humiliate Huoyi to the point where he had no dignity at all. After a cup of tea. Outside world. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 100. Everyone stared intently at Huoyi, who was in despair, and couldn't help but shook their heads, their eyes slightly disappointed. It seems that this guy named Huoyi didn't bring us any surprises. Yeah. Not as good as the other two from his sect. He fell down after just 2 moves. I thought I could look forward to it, one person said with a lonely expression, spreading his hands. Yes. I don't even understand why there is such a big gap between him and those two disciples who are both inner disciples. The noisy words continued to spread until they reached the ears of Xiaoran and others. When Profound Heaven Sect and others heard these words, they all looked angry and angry. Rolling up his sleeves, he wanted to go over and argue with others, but after taking a few steps, he was blocked by a tall, bloodthirsty figure. Several people looked at each other with doubtful expressions. Looking at them with bloodthirsty eyes, he shook his head expressionlessly and said, "Calm down, don't be anxious. Now is not the time." Seeing this, several people turned to look at Linggu. Linggu shook his head at them, and his meaning was already obvious. Seeing this, several people stepped back with helpless expressions. The leader, Xiaoran, naturally heard the words of a few people and said nothing, his expression as calm as ever. After a few breaths, Xiaoran Ke shook his head helplessly and sighed. How could he not feel heartbroken when he saw his apprentice being beaten so hard that he was unable to fight back? Alas! Linggu, who was standing by, saw Xiaoran's expression, thought for a while, then walked over and said, "Master Xiao, there is something I don't understand. Why doesn't Huoyi admit defeat? With his intelligence, it's impossible for him not to see that he the gap with Junhao." Xiaoran glanced at him and said nothing, looking dimly at Huoyi in the mirror. Guangqian, who was behind the two of them, also stood up. He whispered to several disciples, "Look, the blood hole in senior brother Huoyi's chest keeps flowing out like water. I'm afraid that if this goes on for a long time, something might happen, or even kill him. What should I do?" Several people looked a little at a loss. "Senior sister Yunfen, what should we do?" A female disciple asked Yunfenji anxiously. Yunfenji glanced at a few people helplessly, shook her head, and said, "Let's see what Peak Master Xiao says. I believe he won't let his disciples die like this." "Oh." The female disciple nodded. Xiaoran turned around after a moment, glanced at Linggu and everyone, and said slowly, "Of course I hope Yi can surrender, but I understand his temper, and I believe you all know that he will not give in so easily." "Yes, just like Yunfenji just now." "This." Linggu looked hesitant and said, "But if this happens, his life will be in danger." Xiaoran smiled when he heard this, looked at Huoyi who was insisting in the mirror and said, "I think he is gambling. After all, if that move is used, there is still a possibility of a comeback." Linggu raised his eyebrows, not understanding the meaning of these words. Several people behind him also came closer. Yunfenji walked out directly, raised her hands to Xiaoran and Linggu and asked, "Peak Master, is it possible that junior brother Yi still has some trump cards?" Xiaoran nodded, put his hands behind his back, and said, "Yes, I have observed Yi's aura before, and as expected, he has already practiced that move. Don't look at him now. He looks very embarrassed, and he seems to be about to do it. It looks like he is buried in the ground, but in a short while, he will stand in front of us with full health and resurrection, and even defeating Junhao is not impossible." Everyone was shocked and did not ask any more questions. They believed Xiaoran's words and returned to where they were and chose to continue watching. In space, Junhao stopped taunting, but his expression was still disdainful. The flame in his hand continued to burn, and traces of flames burned Huoyi's hair. Huoyi didn't make any move, letting the flames burn wildly on his body. When Junhao saw this scene, his eyes were a little surprised, and he couldn't help but start to wonder if Huo had been burned stupidly. "Or have you become a fool?" "Boy, are you being burned into a fool," Junhao said proudly. Huoyi didn't speak, and stared straight into the sky, as if the flames on his body had no effect on him. Seeing that he didn't speak, Junhao didn't care at all. He crossed his arms over his chest and looked at him with a smile. In this way, the flame burned on Huoyi for a whole stick of incense. The chest has been burned red, and the blood has stopped flowing down, but there is only a burning smell. In less than 2 breaths, the aroma of burnt meat spread throughout the space. Junhao smiled. Now Huoyi's whole body is burning with red flames. The dryness and pain in his skin finally caused Huoyi's complexion to change, his brows furrowed and his complexion became even paler. Bah, bah, bah. Junhao stood there and raised his eyebrows. What's going on? The flames didn't burn him to ashes. Although Junhao had doubts, he still didn't think too much and directly shot the flame in his hand at Huoyi. Bah! The flames shot out seemed to be fused with the flames on Huoyi's body, still burning like that without any change. Junhao frowned, feeling a little uneasy. He didn't know what was going on. He stared at Huoyi and shouted, "Boy, are you dead? If you are not dead, answer my young master's words quickly." He. Next moment, a blue flame, taking the shape of a flower, appeared in Junhao's eyes. There was a trace of shock in his eyes, and the blue flame exploded instantly. Boom! Ah! Boom! Junhao was directly blasted to the other side. He was missing an arm from his limbs and was blind in his left eye. Whirring. Junhao gasped for air. Looking at Huoyi with fearful eyes, he shook his head and shouted, This is impossible. This is the holy fire of Azure Lotus. How could you possibly refine it? This is simply impossible. I thought that I had been refining it for 3 years without success, so how could you succeed? Junhao shouted, his face full of dissatisfaction. Snort. Huoyi snorted coldly, and the flames all over his body merged into his body, and the blood hole in his chest instantly became intact. A trace of fire appeared in the corner of his eyes, and he looked at Junhao and said coldly, because your heart is already dark. The Azure Lotus holy fire represents purity and light, so how could it choose you? Your arrogance has ruined yourself. It seems that you have really been spoiled by your family. Let me teach you a lesson today. The words fell. 3 Azure Lotus sacred fires exuded terrifying energy and flew over. There was a violent explosion, and it shattered like a mountain that was instantly destroyed. Junhao died with a trace of unwillingness. Before he died, his eyes widened and his mouth opened with a hint of disbelief. Why did you dare to kill me?